Hello, I'm Beverly Elliott, the Executive Director of the African American Museum of Southern Arizona. Welcome. We are delighted to have you here today. To give you a little bit of history of how this all began, during the pandemic, my 7-year-old grandson was doing a report on an African American person. Of course, by that time, he'd learned to Google and find a famous African American, Martin Luther King, W.E.B. Du Bois. Well, he had heard me speak about museums that I've been working with, and he wondered where the museum was in Arizona. After doing a little bit of research, found out there wasn't one. So welcome to the first African American Museum of Southern Arizona.
Hi, I'm Emma. Enjoy our wonderful exhibit about the Buffalo Soldiers of Southern Arizona. Buffalo Soldiers were created after the Civil War in 1866. Prior to 1866, Black soldiers were not allowed to serve in the U.S. Army. With the passing of the Army Organization Act in 1866, the Buffalo Soldiers were formed. These gentlemen were created into cavalry and infantry units, characterized by these blue uniforms with the yellow insignia. They would carry great curved sabers as they protected the regions of the Southwest and the frontier of the United States. They also had a hand in our creation of our national parks. They worked in other government-sanctioned wars, such as the Spanish-American War as well. They continue to be a focal point of Arizona history as we remember them here at Fort Huachuca in Arizona, as well as their ancestors that we have numerous oral histories and legacy stories talking about their contributions to United States history and Arizona history. This display case is focused on two Buffalo Soldiers that were active here in Arizona, Sergeant Benjamin Brown and Corporal Isaiah Mays. They were both awarded the National Medal of Honor in 1889 for their bravery during the Wham Paymaster robbery. During this robbery, Sergeant Benjamin Brown, Corporal Isaiah Mays were transporting funds to active soldiers within the region at different forts in Arizona, such as Fort Huachuca and Fort Grant. Funds that would equal about $900,000 today, so a very great sum of money. While they were transporting these funds, they were attacked while on the road by bandits. Both of them fought very bravely to protect the funds. Unfortunately, they were stolen and no one knows what happened to them. The money was never recovered. Benjamin Brown and Isaiah Mays were injured, but they survived the ordeal. And for their bravery, they were awarded the National Medal of Honor in 1889. Here, they are recognized for their bravery as national heroes, and they are both laid to rest currently in Washington, D.C. We also prioritize personal individual histories, so we are lucky enough to be contacted by Benjamin Brown's great niece, Trudy, who offered a lot of information about her ancestor, offering some personal interviews and history, legacy stories, talking about what does he mean to their family, how has his story been passed down through generations, and we uphold that here in the museum today.
We were delighted and overjoyed that we had Ruby Bridges come to visit Tucson. She only visited a few places, the Today Show and Tucson, Arizona. We held this amazing event at Palo Verde High School, but what we were more excited about was the opportunity to listen to her tell her story in her words. As an older adult looking back and being 6 years old at the time, we were excited that the city of Tucson and Mayor Regino Romero, as well as our Board of Supervisors, declared that day, November 14th, as Ruby Bridges Day in Tucson. So now I'll show you the video.
Welcome to the Ruby Bridges exhibit. Ruby Bridges is an American icon. On November 14th, 2022, Ruby visited our beloved Tucson and was a key speaker in a fireside chat at Palo Verde High School. This event was organized by the African American Museum of Southern Arizona. The title sponsor for the event was AAA of Northern California. Ruby, as you can see, and a copy of the painting by Norman Rockwell on the wall, was just a merely 6-year-old first grader who was responsible for integrating schools in New Orleans, which opened the door for other southern states who had already been asked to open their doors to African American children. So many things happened to Ruby and her family, including suffering discrimination. They lost their homes, their jobs. Ruby had to be escorted by federal marshals to school for several weeks. When Ruby entered second grade, she told us that the prejudice and ugliness was just even worse to go through. We are very grateful that Ruby was brave and had the courage to go to school where she was not liked, but she was definitely loved by her first grade teacher. We were so delighted to host Miss Bridges, who has written 2 books, and there are several movies about Ruby Bridges. Some are even animated or cartoons. Ruby is a true hero. Enjoy the slides of Miss Bridges here in Tucson telling her story in her words.
As you can see, there's some amazing pictures that Miss Bridges took with several different groups, including a lot of our principals, teachers, and students in Tucson Unified School District. Once again, we are all so proud to have had Ruby visit us here at the African American Museum of Southern Arizona. We had children very involved with the walk. We had a curriculum set up at several different schools throughout several districts, and those schools participated even in a contest to find out which students would be able to ask Miss Bridges questions the evening of the event. As you can see here, students were very involved in several schools throughout our district, primarily elementary, a few high schools, as well as in mid part of Arizona. She called it a day of dialogue. We did as well. We'd love for you to look up Ruby Bridges and find out more about her life. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ruby. This is obviously, we had a packed house of 1,200 people at Palo Verde High School. We're delighted to have students and families that were able to attend free to the event based on us garnering different sponsorships. Almost 1,000 people showed up, although 1,200 people paid, and they were so excited to see Miss Bridges and hear her story. Not only her story of what happened to her before this event, but also how she grew up later. Please join us at the African American Museum to learn more about Ruby Bridges and several websites that you can go to regarding Miss Bridges here in Tucson at the African American Museum of Southern Arizona.
Over here, we have 2 women activists, Quincy Douglas and Margaret Campbell. Quincy Douglas was born in Oklahoma in 1905. Mrs. Douglas moved to the South Park neighborhood in 1947 and became a community activist. She passed away in 1986. She founded the LIFTS program, which stands for Low Income Free Transportation Services. She always concerned about the community's needs. She wanted to help people to get food and go to work. So she approached Jim Click, who provided her with 2 vans. She recruited neighborhood drivers, and they drove people to work and shop. 6 years later, the city took over the program, and it is now known as the Van Tran and Song Tran. This started the bus system in Tucson. She was also an active leader in the Model Cities project. This project brought sidewalks, food programs, neighborhood centers, and streetlights to areas in need. There's a community center, a park, and a public library named in her honor. The picture over here depicts the statue of Margaret Campbell and Quincy Douglas, and it is displayed in the Quincy Douglas Public Library here in Tucson. This public library is dedicated in memory of her life and work. Quincy Douglas's grandson, Quinn Davis, is an artist who designed this statue. If you scan the QR code over here, you can watch the interview of Quinn Davis. The video is also available on our website. The other woman in the statue is Margaret Campbell. She was born in 1899 in North Carolina and passed away in 1971. She moved to Tucson and bought land in the south part in 1942. She had severe allergic at that time, and she worried about natural disasters since she experienced terrible flood before. Thus, she reconstructed a sinkhole in her land to build her underground home. Margaret Campbell is a very talented African-American woman. She was an author, musician, and piano teacher, and she spoke 5 languages. In 1963, she became the first female African-American to publish her book in Arizona. The book is called Iva the Dawn, and it is a fiction about Noah's great-great-grandson, Iva, rebuilding the world after the biblical flood. This book is also included in the University of Arizona Special Collection. National radios, newspapers, and magazines described her as an author lived underground and wrote about rebuilding the world. Her underground house was located close to nowadays Quincy Douglas Recreational Center. Unfortunately, the house was burned due to an electrical accident a long time ago. Let us remember the contributions and achievements of these 2 strong female African-American activists in our community.
So over here we have family histories. Family history is very important to everyone. It's lucky if we live with our loving family members, but it might be a luxury for some people to find out their birth parents and family roots. For example, if people were adopted and had a limited information about their original parents, or they were born near a battlefield and separated from their family, some people may never find out the history of their parents. Thus, it is crucial to find out and preserve our family history. We already asked our visitors a few questions, and for all the virtual tour viewers, you can think about the answers in your mind. Do you know where your grandparents were born? Grandparents is only 1 generation up from our parents. So, many visitors answered yes when we were having an in-person tour. However, what about your grandparents' parents, where they were born? And do you know where your great-grandparents were raised at? Since immigration is a foundation of America, many people can trace their origin to France, Italy, or Sweden in the 1700s or even 1600s. However, this does not always happen to people of color. Most of us can only trace back 2 or 3 generations. When our director, Beverly, was teaching her students, especially high school students, she often asks them to call their grandma and ask, "Grandma, who's your mom?" Most of the time, it's interesting to find out our family history. We might end up learning that our great-grandparents were engineers, and we are now doing the same job. The characteristic runs deeply in our DNA. While finding the traditions in the family, we may also find changes throughout our family history. Nowadays, the world is changing rapidly, and our lifestyles are also diversified. We still celebrate Thanksgiving, but we might cook different foods compared to decades ago when every family cooks turkey. Some people celebrate Christmas with their family members across the US, or even on the other side of the planet, just like my family. So it's always vital to preserve and share our family histories with future generations. Speaking of preserving family history, Carl Ferris's great-grandfather passed down their family history through quilt code. Displayed over here is a quilt made by Carl Ferris to demonstrate the many iconic quilt code patterns. Carl Ferris is a Tucson resident, and she is over 95 years old. Quilt code was used during the Civil War by enslaved African Americans to navigate the Underground Railroad. It worked like a GPS for slaves to find out their escape route. Most of the slaves were never educated. Some of them may not have the necessary talking skills, but they had this intelligent communication method. They saw patterns onto the quilt and hung it outside. The different patches signaled different messages. For example, the log cabin means that here is a safe house to stay, and this drunkar's path means that you need to run a zigzag to throw off slave hunters. And over here, a Jewish lady, Yolanda Weiniger, is another person who used quilt to preserve her own family history. When she was 5 years old, her family was running away from Nazis in Poland, and all they had were clothes and a radio. Then, after searching for safe locations, they used the radio to listen to the music by Marian Anderson. Marian's music brought them love and courage, although they later found out that Marian Anderson was an African American musician. Yolanda and her family never changed their love of music. They were also surprised by how the America was treating African American people. They feel that the discrimination towards African Americans was similar to how the Nazis treated Jewish people. To pursue for equality, Yolanda's mother became a teacher and started to teach African American children. The quilt on the right was inspired by her mother's teacher career.
One of the most important and impressive parts of the museum are our oral histories. Oral histories allow our elders, basically, to tell a story about their lives in their words. We are so proud of the people that we have thus far, but believe me, we have more to come. What I think is most important for African Americans is that oral histories have been a huge part of our history for generations and hundreds of years. It is the only way, especially coming to this country as enslaved people, that we were able to pass down our history. So at this point, we are delighted that we have 23 of our oral historians here in Southern Arizona who have already stepped up and been recorded. You can, of course, find more about this on our website at www.aamsaz.org and hear the complete stories of some of these wonderful people who've housed Major League Baseball players, who've all come from Florida and helped with the sports. Been the very first African American to play basketball at the University of Arizona and get a degree. Maybe taking a trip from Texas, thinking that maybe, I can move it to a different cabin, and finding out that he couldn't, and also couldn't go to college at the U of A without paying. Or maybe a wonderful woman who's written a book, Tani Sanchez, about African American foods. She's an author, and she's also right here at the University of Arizona. So many things. Clarence Boykins helping to bring Martin Luther King Day to Arizona, which many of you may know we were the last state, and it finally went through in 1996. So please take some time, visit our website, and find out more about our amazing Southern Arizonans. We also have amazing legacy stories here at the African American Museum. Some of you may even have heard of Tony Dungy, the first African American coach to win a Super Bowl. Well, Tony Dungy has a connection right here in Tucson, but what's more important is these are stories that are told by people who are family members or friends about someone who's passed on, and they're not here to tell their story. But we want to make sure that we support and make sure that people understand that legacy. For example, Tony Dungy, he's at his dad's memorial services, and guess what? He finds out his dad was a Tuskegee Airman. It's so important for us to ask questions to our family, and that's based on your family history, oral histories. So this leads to legacy stories. We want to get those stories before they pass away if possible. But if it's not, it's wonderful to leave these stories so other people can learn more about your family and their contributions to whether it's Southern Arizona or the United States. So please, once again, visit the website and learn more about the legacy stories that have had an impact right here in Southern Arizona.
Here to my right is our exhibit on the Crown Act. And did you know that 80% of Black women feel they need to change their natural hairstyle or texture to fit into a professional setting? Or that Black women are 30% more likely to be spoken to about their hairstyle or hair texture at the workplace? Created in 2019, the Crown Act fights for the end of hair discrimination in the workplace, and the acronym stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. Originally, only Tucson and Tempe had passed the Crown Act into law, but the state of Arizona recently passed the executive order on March 17, 2023. Here at the museum, we want everyone to walk with pride in how they choose to wear their hair. It is our crowning glory.
We are really proud of this display. This display exhibits Coach Fred Snowden. He was the very first African-American basketball coach and a head coach at a major college or university. Most of you are probably thinking, oh, maybe it was Georgetown, maybe it was in Detroit, maybe it was in Los Angeles. No, it was right here at the University of Arizona. Coach Fred Snowden came here from Detroit via the University of Michigan. He was also the very first assistant basketball coach at a major college or university at the University of Michigan. He moved here with his family, and his daughter actually tells the legacy story. This was 1972. Most of you are thinking, oh, pretty progressive time. Not so quickly. Coach Snowden had to, of course, once again, redlining. He was unable to live where he wanted to live in 1972 with a pretty decent job. He was up against a lot of discrimination. As a matter of fact, one of his biggest supporters was Coach John Wooden, who was the UCLA winningest college basketball coach at the time. Coach eventually left basketball and went ahead and became basically the executive director of what is now known as Food City. So one of the things that we are extremely proud of is how he established Tucson as a basketball town. And believe me, it's hard to get tickets today. So thank you to those coaches that followed him, such as Lute Olson, Coach Miller, and Coach Lloyd that we have now. We're very grateful. We still have a great basketball program. So if you want to know more about how this all started with Coach Fred Snowden, check out our website. Hope you'll enjoy it.
Juneteenth marks the moment in United States history. June 19, 1865, when the remaining 250,000 enslaved African Americans in Confederate states were legally declared free. This announcement was made in Texas 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln, on January 1, 1863, signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing almost 4 million enslaved people. This day in June is known as Juneteenth or Freedom Day. At Juneteenth celebrations around the country, you will see the color red in clothing, arts, and food. This red is a sign of resilience, determination, sacrifice, and joy. The color red is highly associated with the cultures of enslaved people who came to the United States as part of the transatlantic slave trade. These people came from the Yoruba, Congo, and other tribes. Now that slavery had ended, free African Americans focused on and began searching for family members who had been separated or sold away. The number of years of separation didn't stop people from hoping to reunite with those they loved. Many enslaved people had no idea about the enslaved people in Texas and other Confederate states, so most people had no idea that African Americans remained enslaved. With this new freedom, education was crucial to becoming self-sufficient, and many sought was to educate themselves and their children. In the 150 years since Freedom Day, the Juneteenth holiday had become a time to gather with family and community as we celebrate the future and honor our past.